if you look at the 2025 PGA Tour stats, the top 4 putters on tour all use AimPoint. I think 5 of the top 6 all use AimPoint. The putting leader in birdies uses AimPoint, in conversions uses AimPoint, 3 putts uses AimPoint. If you go down the list, it's vast majority all AimPoint guys, and there's more and more every single year. And so what will happen is if you don't use AimPoint, you're going to be at a competitive disadvantage. Now, if you're one of the few people in the world who's luckily born a naturally great green reader, which I've maybe only met 2 in my entire life, then you don't need it. But that is such a minority of people, especially juniors.
Welcome to The Golf Parent, where you get access to the best minds in junior golf. I'm your host, Ryan Addams, and today I'm incredibly pumped to be talking to Mark Sweeney, the inventor of AimPoint, the game-changing green reading system that we've all seen on TV and see the pros using. In this episode, Mark shares the science behind reading greens, how junior golfers can apply it immediately, and why understanding aim and intention might just be the most overlooked aspect of junior golf development. Before we get into the episode though, I want to share something that I'm incredibly proud of. My very first kids book called The Adventures of Chase and Bella and the Magic Golf Ball. This book is all about reinforcing the message that magic flows where your focus goes, and where your focus goes, the golf ball goes. It reinforces grit, perseverance, and all those life skills that we want our kids to have, all using golf as a setting. It's beautifully illustrated, it's hardcover, and it's chock full of actually relevant stuff that I want to share with my own kids, and I hope you do as well. You can get your copy right now on Amazon.com. It's $18.99 and it's available today. And now, without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Mark Sweeney.
Boy, am I excited for this conversation. I finally have Mark Sweeney, the inventor, the founder, the genius behind AimPoint on the Golf Parent Podcast. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I hope I didn't build you up too much, but listen, it's not every day that we get a guest on the podcast that arguably is transformed the game as much as you have. Because what I don't understand is, why did it take so long to actually come up with a system to be able to reliably read putts? Is it because for so long we thought that putting's an art form and not a science? Maybe let's start there. Is it a science, or is it an art form, or is it somewhere in between?
Well, reading greens is certainly 99% science, if not 100% science. And I think the problem was, 20 years ago when I first started this, and there was nobody made the effort to actually figure out the science of putting. And when I talk to people, specifically, I mean green reading, which is predicting how much the ball breaks before you hit it. It's not that insanely of a difficult of a task. But when I talk to pro golfers and people in the industry 20 years ago, they all just made the assumption that it was impossible. They'd say, well, it's there's too many unknown factors, and you've got, effects that cancel out gravity, and the mountains will make it not work properly. There's a bunch of crazy myths. But there was this collective mindset that it just wasn't possible. And even after I created the software and was testing it on TV and showing the TV networks that it actually worked and that you could predict putts very accurately, they kept pushing back for probably 2 years. And just said, well, we just don't think it's possible still. And so there's a big, huge cultural mind shift that had to change to convince people that, yes, you actually can predict with a very, very high degree of accuracy how much a ball is going to turn across a slope surface.
Okay, so wait a second. I got to stop you there, because again, I'm a weekend warrior, 16 handicap. I am in no way a professional, but I've been taught that look for the water because it's always going to break towards the water. Are you saying that that's a fallacy? Is that an urban myth? Does that not actually factor into true green reading?
No, it has nothing to do with true green reading. It may generally break roughly towards water, but I could show you millions of putts that don't break towards water. And the reality is the water has no effect on the putt. The only thing that affects the putt, which the number one tenet that I always tell people, the first thing you have to accept if you want to be a great green reader, is that the only thing that is affecting the putt is the point of contact between the ball and the ground. Is it sloped or is it not sloped? And if there's tilt, the ball will turn. If there's not tilt, the ball won't turn. It has nothing to do with mountains or rivers or lakes or downtowns or anything whatsoever. And the faster you accept that, the better of a green reader you'll be. Those are things you use if you just don't know. Well, I don't know what it's doing, therefore it must go to the water. Well, maybe not, and the hard part is not so much which way is it going to break. The hard part is how much is it going to break. and knowing where the water was is just tells you nothing about how much a ball breaks.
I feel like we're at this point right now where it's like back in ancient history, it was okay. The reason why there was pestilence or a flood or a drought is because you didn't appease the gods. So therefore, that must be the thing. Let's sacrifice a white bull or do a counterclockwise rain dance or whatever it is, because that must be what's working. And then we find out that no, that has nothing to do with it. And I feel like we're at that pivot point right now with golf where it's like you have all these urban myths, you have all these kind of things that apparently have nothing to do with it, and that there actually is a science behind it. So everybody's heard of AimPoint. I mean, at least 99% of people listening to this podcast or seeing this on YouTube probably have heard of AimPoint and know what it is. But for the layman, for the person that has heard it but has no idea what actually is AimPoint, how would you break it down in the simplest way possible for the listeners and the viewers?
Yeah, the simplest way possible is as a method for anybody. You don't even have to have any golf knowledge for anybody to predict how much the ball is going to break on any green, any length of putt, any green speed, any amount of slope. It doesn't matter. It's a very, very accurate and straightforward method for predicting break. And I've taught it to people who have never touched a golf club in their life, and they get the same reads as I do within 20 minutes. And so it was actually designed for kids. I first designed it for 7 and 8 year olds who hadn't had angles in school yet, because we had a green reading system that relied on you understanding what an angle was, like 30 degrees, 45 degrees, and they hadn't learned that in school. So we needed to come up with something that got them aiming in a better place without relying on angles. And 30 days later, it's being used on PGA Tour.
Okay, so what I love that, because it's like they often say with intelligence and knowledge that if you could break it down and if you really understand it, and if you can break it down to the simplest terms and explain it to a 5 or 6 year old, if they can understand it, then anybody can understand it. So what was it then that took it from the angles and the math of it to something just so simple that a 6, 7, 8 year old could understand without any knowledge of green reading?
Sure. I mean, the easiest thing that we did for them was we just said, feel with your feet, which is the higher side of the putt. And then we had them put their thumb against the hole. And believe it or not, the thumb is about a 1.5% slope, which covers, most putts are 1 and 2%. It's probably 80 to 90% of all your putts are going to be 1 or 2%. And the thumb was right in the middle of that. And so it was very natural where they just said, okay, the right side's higher, put your thumb on the right side of the hole. And it just got them aiming above the hole somewhere reasonable. But what we realized was that it wasn't enough for big slopes. And so 3s and 4s, it was dramatically under reading. And so we started using 1 finger per percent. And it turns out, for some unknown reason, that pretty much exactly matches the science and the math behind how much a ball breaks. So it comes down to simply gauge how much slope you are, hold up your fingers, and you'll get a mathematically correct aim for any putt, which seems unintuitive and too simplistic. But believe it or not, there is a ton of math and trigonometry behind it that all works great, that you don't need to know any of it to use it.
So when you're feeling the slope with your feet, where's the most important part to be feeling it? Is it close to the hole? Is it? I'm assuming it's not where you're starting the putt per se. I'm assuming it's somewhere else in the green.
Definitely
But
not where
where
you're
is it?
starting. Yeah.
Definitely
Yeah.
not. Okay. So where should we be
Yeah. It's
feeling it?
definitely not. It's definitely not at the ball. Middle area of the putt. So the big, you see players stand over their ball and kind of make practice strokes and feel the slope there. That's a big problem, because the slope of the ball has no effect whatsoever really on the overall break. The other major mistake people make is they go very close to the hole and they go last 2 or 3 feet. And the reason that doesn't count is because the putt is over by then. So let's say you take a 15-foot putt, it's going to break on average 1.5 feet. The last 3 or 4 feet are only breaking a couple inches. The putt's over, the break's over, and how the ball arrives at the end of the putt has already been dictated back kind of in the middle area. So we're really focusing on the middle area of the putt, not the beginning and not the end. And people fight me on the, looking at what happens the last couple feet all the time, but the reality is the putt's finished. It's too late.
Okay, so you're saying the middle third of the putt is what has the biggest impact on the overall success or failure of the putt? Am I hearing that correct?
Yeah, it basically dictates how the putt's going to behave. So it's that
Interesting.
middle third, middle area. And if you watch people do aim point, they're always exploring or focusing on that middle area, because that is mathematically where you need to focus, which is not what we've been taught our whole lives learning golf, right? They say, look at the end of the putt and see what it does there. But it's wrong. It's another one of those, visually looks like the ball's turning a lot at the end, but it actually really isn't. Everything has happened already. it's too late. You're too late to the party if you're looking at the last 2 or 3 feet. You've got to really focus your attention earlier on and figure out what's going on earlier on in the putt.
Okay, so I'm going to walk you through the process that I've learned, that I don't even know if I've been taught it, but I feel like this was the conventional way of reading a putt. Is you kind of get behind the putt and you get a general idea. And then you walk around the putt on the low side. You kind of get a general idea of the slope. And then you go behind the putt, which confuses the hell out of me because now I see a completely different break when I'm looking at it from behind
Yeah.
it. And then you kind of walk back towards your putt. Maybe you pace it off if you're that mathematical. And then you just basically stand sideways to the putt, take a couple just guesswork, practice swings, get up, look at the hole, and just go. How much of that is still relevant, and how much of that is just completely just a bad routine?
Most of that is completely irrelevant. The only part I don't mind is for speed reasons. If you go on the low side and look at the overall length of the putt and uphill, downhill, I don't mind that. As far as looking down the line and up the line, completely irrelevant, because what you're actually still trying to do is figure out your side tilt. So when you're looking up and down the line, you're trying to say, okay, how much is the ball tilted left or right? And then you have to guess what that means in terms of break. Now, a couple of problems with that. Number one, like as you said, it looks different on both sides of the hole, so you get conflicting information. Number two, when you stand on the far side of the hole, you're standing on a slope that doesn't affect the putt, and that will affect your interpretation of slope. If you're standing on a very flat slope, but the ball is rolling over a steeper slope, that's going to skew you in the wrong direction. The other thing is people look straight down the line of play from the ball to the hole, and that is not where the ball's rolling. So you actually want to be focusing on where the ball's actually rolling, which is on a curve. Now, good luck looking down a curve and trying to figure out side slope. That's one reason why we stand over it and we're feeling it, because we're actually up where the ball is, on the path of the putt, on a curve, feeling the amount of side slope that the ball's experiencing, not looking straight down your line of play, which is kind of a proxy for what it does, but it actually can cause a lot of problems. A lot of mistakes come from that.
Yeah, I'm confused when I'm trying to do green reading, big time, because there is so much conflicting information out there as to how to actually read a green. And okay, I've got a question here. Is there such a thing as a straight putt? And if so, at what distance is a straight putt? So to phrase it a different way, is there such a thing as a straight putt past like 6 feet or 8 feet? Like, does that exist, or is every putt going to be breaking one way or the other a little bit?
There is technically straight putts outside 6 or 7 feet, but they're double breaking straight. They tend not to be laser straight, right? They tend to be a little bit left, a little bit right. So it's what we call a straight aim, which is not the same as a straight putt. A straight putt means there's no side tilt at all. Yes, those happen on shorter putts. They're much less likely to happen outside about 7 feet. You tend to get these little wiggly straight aim putts on longer putts. They're not impossible, but they're pretty rare where it actually rolls laser straight. Most people assume there has to be break. There doesn't have to be break, but there's a very thin line above and below the hole where you would actually aim dead straight at the hole. So typically there will be some kind of break. It might not be a lot, but it's pretty rare where it's absolutely a dead straight aim outside 7 feet, I'd say.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got the system, which is, I mean, we don't have the system, but what I'm piecing together here is that most of what I've been doing, and most of what most people are doing right now, is irrelevant. What's important is to at least get an idea if it's going uphill, downhill, and then get your feet around that middle part of the green. What am I doing there? Am I facing the hole? Am I flipping around? Does it matter? And am I just kind of feeling out with my feet? And then how do I take that information and then get back to the ball and do something about it?
Before we get back to Mark, I want to remind you about the guide that we created called 99 Mistakes That Golf Parents Make, How to Raise a Champion. It's 70-some pages of distilled down wisdom from top D1 coaches, tour professionals, sports psychologists, and parents just like you. Head over to thegolfparent.com, grab the free book, and you'll save yourself years of heartache. It takes 2 minutes, and again, it's completely free. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, you're trying to figure out the side tilt, right? So the ball breaks because it's tilted laterally, it's tilted sideways. How much tilt there is affects how much it breaks, right? So the more side tilt you get, the faster the ball breaks. So break at a fundamental level is very simple. It's how much tilt sideways and how long is it rolling for. So you take the amount of side tilt basically, and you're not actually multiplying, but just think of it as multiplying that by the amount of time it's rolling for. That's why long putts break more than short putts, because it's rolling for longer. So with AimPoint, we're just trying to estimate how much side tilt there is, and then the fingers are a conversion tool that convert that slope number into a mathematically correct aim point. So if you think it's breaking like across a 2% slope and you hold up two fingers, that will give you a mathematically correct aim point, and it scales with the length of the putt. So whether you're at 10 feet or 30 feet, because when you hold up your fingers, you're creating a launch angle basically off your eyes, and that scales with distance. So I don't need to know how long the putt is. If you were not using aim point, you would have to know that a 10-foot putt, 11-foot putt, and a 12-foot putt all have different breaks. And so you'd have to know the side tilt and exactly how long the putt is, which nobody is particularly good at. And with aim point, you take that away from the equation. We don't need to know how long the putt is. We just need to know how much side tilt there is. Some idea of speed, but really the amount of side tilt is what changes from putt to putt.
Okay, so this sounds a little controversial. You don't need to know the distance, you just need to know the speed. Can you explain that?
Yes, if technically, if you were writing a computer program to predict break, which I did, you'd have to know how much side tilt, the length of the putt, the green speed, wind and grain, and how hard you want to hit the hole with. You got all these factors going on. Now, let's assume the green speed is fairly constant. Let's assume how hard you're going to hit it into the hole is fairly constant. Then you would technically need to know amount of side tilt, length of putt. With aim point, we don't need to know the length of the putt because the fingers automatically are converting that amount of slope over that length because it's giving you a visual of where the correct aim is. So all we're really doing with aim point from putt to putt is saying how much side slope is this ball rolling across. There's some adjustments for uphill, downhill speed and green speed and things like that. You can adjust for that, but those shouldn't change dramatically from putt to putt other than uphill, downhill in some situations. You're really just constantly evaluating how much slope am I putting across, which is really what you're doing when you're looking up and down the line. What you're trying to do when you look up and down the line is figure out side slope. Well, we just do it with our feet because it's 100 times more accurate. It's on the path of the putt, where the ball's actually touching the ground, and it's not subject to optical illusions.
There's no doubt that the eyes play a lot of tricks on you. Maybe I'm not, maybe I'm not fully understanding this one point, but I need to have an idea, obviously, if it's a 20-foot putt or a 10-foot putt, because I have an idea of my stroke distance and whether or not I'm letting the ball die into the hole or I'm just ramming it in with speed. I'm assuming I have to take that into consideration as well when I'm figuring out what to do before I pull the trigger on the actual putt.
Yeah, for speed control, you need to have some idea of length, kind of. Yes, you need to know whether it's long or shorter for speed control. Obviously, all 20-foot putts are not created equal, depending on uphill, downhill, grain, things like that. Now, as far as your capture speed, whether you die it in or whether you're jamming it, you should never be jamming it in the hole. Your speed should always be between, we always say 6 inches to maximum 2 feet by the hole, unless you're hitting a lag putt. A lag putt, we're just trying to get as close as possible. I don't care if it's short, long, that's kind of your dead weight speed. But 20 feet in, you really want everything kind of 6 inches to 2 feet. And you really shouldn't be changing that because if you hit it harder than 2 feet by, A, you've introduced 3 putts. B, you've introduced lip outs. You got loads of lip outs at 3 foot by speed, which we don't want. And obviously, we don't want to introduce 3 putts if we don't have to. So the difference in aim between hitting it a foot by and 2 feet by is less than an inch. I mean, it's just a minute adjustment. It's not a big adjustment. You see a lot of people, they get match play and they say, well, I must make this. I'm going to hit it really hard. And they take off too much break and they hit it low and hard. And then it's 4 feet by the hole. Well, unless they hit the dead center of the hole, I would have lipped out anyway. Right. So we're really training people to have consistent speed all the time up to 20-ish feet. Should really be the same speed, whether it's 3 feet or 10 feet or 20 feet. It's only on lag putts where you kind of back off on that a little bit.
So when you say same speed, you mean the ball is rolling the same speed. It's not rolling faster. It's not rolling slower. It's the same speed off of your putter face. And obviously that speed is dictated by how far you bring your putter face back and through. But the speed that the ball is rolling down the green is consistent from 0 to 20 feet. Am I understanding that correct?
No, the speed that the ball arrives at the hole. Now, it'll be a little bit faster uphill, a little bit slower downhill, but a lot of times we consider the distance past the hole. So how far past the hole you want to hit it? Let's say 18 inches, 1 foot to 2 feet maximum. It will be a little bit different ball speed at the hole, depending whether you're uphill, downhill, or slow greens or fast greens. but realize all putts up to, let's say, 20 feet. Let's say you want to hit them all a foot past the hole in a perfect world. They're all arriving at the hole at the same speed. They all start at a different speed off your putter face, which is what you have to control, but they're all arriving at the hole at pretty much the same speed, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
Doesn't matter
Yeah,
whether
that
it's
does
3
make
feet or
sense.
15 feet. If you want to hit it a foot by, they are arriving at the hole at the same speed. And so we're trying to make that speed consistent, not, well, here's a 3-footer, let me hit it straight, firm, and jam it as hard as I can. That's a bad strategy. And then again, lag putts are a little bit different. If you get outside 25, 30 feet, you're really just trying to get it as close as possible. So we're not trying to hit everything past the hole at 30 feet. We're trying to hit it more dead weight, stopping it at the hole, and have kind of an equal number of long and shorts at that point. And again, that's primarily to eliminate 3 putts.
So is there any value then of to be pacing off the distance of the hole? Or is it just kind of a mental calculation like
Yeah,
this is
there's
a
some
20-foot putt?
value. Yeah, there's some value in that. That's helpful, but it's not the end all. If it's 20 feet steep downhill, it might play like it's 12 feet. So
Mm.
having some idea of distance, yes, it helps. Having definitely some idea of uphill, downhill can be helpful, but you've also got to be able to not say it's 20 feet, therefore my putter goes back 15 inches and goes forward 14 inches. Because if it's 20 feet uphill or downhill, it will not play like 20 feet. It's more of a, what does it play like? Whether you think about distance or timing, um, the length of the putt is kind of a good starting point, but you have to be able to adjust off of that. Like full swing, it's 150 yards to the hole, but it's 20 yards uphill, so it's going to play 170,
Yeah,
right?
makes
Or
sense.
it's 30 yards downhill, so it's going to play 110 or something like that.
That calculation is not part of AimPoint. AimPoint's really about the slope, the break of the putt. It seems like that we still need the experience to know what a 20-foot downhill versus 20-foot uphill or whatever it is, what that speed, what we need to do to get it to go 18 inches past the hole. That's on us to kind of figure out our own distance control. But then when it comes to reading whether or not it's left, right, and how far outside of the hole we need to aim, that's where AimPoint shines. Am I understanding that correct?
Yes, yes. AimPoint will give you a very precise place to aim, which will be a correct, appropriate place to aim, which then allows you to have better speed. So a lot of times when people have bad reads, they use speed to cover up for it. So they underread it and they hit it too hard,
Mm.
right? I see that all the time. And one of the first byproducts of having a good read is people's speed automatically gets better dynamically, just gets better by itself. But ultimately, that's where the majority of your training and putting ends up being is on speed control, because the read is easy. The read, honestly, is A plus B equals C. The read is a read. You're done with that. Your stroke should be pretty consistent. If you're a half decent player, your stroke should be relatively constant. And it's really just a speed game at that point. Now, the problem now is even with very high level players, their reads are okay at best. Their speed tends to be better than the reads, honestly, but they're still missing a lot of putts, and that's causes an immense amount of frustration. So we just want to eliminate the variable of read. This ball must break 6 inches, like it or not. That's where you got to aim. Okay, now it frees your brain up to only think about speed control, and that helps a load with the younger players too. Teaching players young what a correct place to aim is, because otherwise you've got to wait decades of experience, and even then they might not be good green readers. I mean, I've taught Champions Tour players who are still not good green readers. It actually gets worse as you get older for some reason. I don't know why. Probably because your eyes change.
Yeah.
You'd think Champions Tour players would be the best green readers you've ever seen in your life, but that your eyes change every 10 years, and if you're doing a visual read, that can really burn you over the decades if you are lucky enough to play golf that long. So yes, ultimately you want to do a lot of speed control work and develop that to the best of your ability.
So when we're talking about the aim point, like where to actually aim, are you picking an intermediary target? Are you looking at something 6 feet in front of your putter and just making sure it rolls over that, or 6 inches in front of your putter? Where are we actually aiming? Once we've got the read and we're confident, where does our eye then focus to make sure that it's going in the right place?
I personally think it's best to focus on the aim point up by the hole. Or if you want to spot putt, it's got to be very close to your ball, like 6 inches maximum in front of your ball. I see people perform the best aiming up by the hole rather than intermediate point, because the reality is there's only a couple spots that you can aim at that are actually on your aim line. So if your aim line goes straight from the ball to your aim point by the hole, it'll stay on that line in the beginning a little bit, but it's breaking immediately. The minute you hit a ball, it's breaking. You might not see it breaking, but it is. Gravity is always working against the ball. If there's any tilt, it is turning. So I find if you aim at the aim point, just like if you're playing full swing and you say, okay, here's an approach shot, aim at the tree to the right and draw it in or fade it in or whatever. Well, aim putting's the same. You've got to aim it somewhere. You've got to point your putter somewhere. And if you want a correct aim, it's either got to be up by the hole or a tangent line back very close to your ball. But intermediate, I think it's probably the worst way to do it because the ball will be rolling over a spot that is not where you aimed.
Hmm. It's rare to get two putting experts back to back on podcasts. I haven't released it yet, but the podcast just before this one, it was Dr. Sasho McKenzie. He's the guy behind the Stack Golf system, and he has been very vocal about the looking at the hole the entire way, like not looking down when you're putting at all. And he's done a bunch of research, he's done a bunch of papers, and I found that fascinating because I haven't really heard of that, where when you're getting up over the putt, don't look down, look at your target the entire way, and then putt to that target. Where do you stand on that? Does that kind of go in alignment with what you're saying, where you shouldn't be looking necessarily in front of the ball, but kind of keep your target on the aim point somewhere close to the hole?
Here's the facts. The facts is your face has to be pointing at the right place at impact. Okay, and let's say that spot's 12 inches right of the hole. It's got to be pointing within an inch or an inch and a half of that spot, or you're not making the putt. Okay, so are you able to aim your putter at that and then look back at the hole and still start on that line? If you can, fine, right? But if you look back at the hole, and I have no problem looking back at the hole either. Whatever works for the player, I'm fine with. But it's not just this kind of magical visualization where people say, "Well, just imagine the putt going in and it'll go in," because that doesn't work. That's BS. The putter face has to be pointed at a very small window to make a putt outside 7 feet, right? You have a very small window to be pointing the putter face at for it to go in. Now, I want to know where that spot is. I don't want to just be guessing every time. I want to know mathematically where is that spot. I want to point my putter there, and then by whatever means necessary, I have to be pointing my putter face there at impact. Now, if you can do that and control speed better while looking at the hole, great. I have no problem with that. I don't like it when people get locked on the ball only and never look back at the hole. I think that's a problem. A lot of good players will look back and forth, and then putt. And as long as their speed control is good, I think that's fine also. But you've got to be pointed at the right spot at impact, and you got to control speed. So in my opinion, I don't care what anybody does as long as they can do that effectively.
There are so many pros that are using AimPoint right now. Do you see this? Like, if you had your crystal ball, do you see AimPoint as being the future? Like all the junior golfers are going to be. I know you talk to a lot of college, teams, so many junior golfers you work with. Is this the future? Like, is this the trend that everybody's just going to be understanding or using some form of AimPoint, and you'd be silly not to? Like, do you see that?
Yeah, I do, because even right now, if you look at the 2025 PGA Tour stats, the top 4 putters on tour all use AimPoint. I think 5 of the top 6 all use AimPoint. The putting leader in birdies uses AimPoint, in conversions uses AimPoint, in 3-putts uses AimPoint. If you go down the list, it's vast majority all AimPoint guys, and there's more and more every single year. And so what will happen is if you don't use AimPoint, you're going to be at a competitive disadvantage. Now, if you're one of the few people in the world who's luckily born a naturally great green reader, which I've maybe only met 2 in my entire life, then you don't need it. But that is such a minority of people who actually, especially juniors, I don't care what anybody says, juniors do not read putts well because they don't have the experience. They just don't. And every time the green speed changes, your reads change. The length of the putt changes it. Uphill, downhill changes it. And they just do not have enough miles under them to be good at it. So AimPoint shortcuts that and says, it doesn't matter what you see, this ball, based on the amount of slope, it has to break a certain amount. And it's very easy to figure out how much the ball has to break. Why would you not want to know that? Why would you say, don't tell me the answer, I'll just figure it out over the next 30 years. Don't worry about it. It just makes no sense at all. So there's still coaches that are it doesn't make any sense at all. There's still coaches that are resistant to it. But I see an increasing number of players every week practically on tour. I think I've taught 5 new tour players just in the last 2 weeks that are all using it, and they're going to start using it in January as soon as they start up again here in a couple of weeks. So yes, I think it's absolutely future because it works. There's no doubt that it works whatsoever. Regardless of what people say it is faster than walking to both sides of the hole. It's very efficient. And just I have so many case studies of tour players who are average or below average who started AimPoint, and their putting just went through the roof. Just got instantly better. Like so many examples of that. So statistically, it holds up against any kind of microscope.
Well, I mean, the stat that you just shared, what was it, the top 4 putters on in 2025, all using AimPoint? I mean, that's a hard stop, period, checkmate right there. Like, that's what an endorsement. Who was I
Yeah,
mean, Adam Scott is very famous, Colin
yeah.
Morikawa for using AimPoint, but who was, in your mind, the first pro that you taught it to that really all of a sudden kind of changed its trajectory to be like, no, 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 this is actually something that is going to get some momentum on tour? Like, who would you kind of give that credit to?
Well, the very, very first guy to ever use AimPoint was Scott McCarron. This goes way back, and Scott McCarron was historically, ranked kind of below 160 in putting, and he started
Mm,
AimPoint. And I think every year after that, he was top 10, and then he went to Champions Tour and won a ton of stuff on the Champions Tour. On the women's side, it was Stacey Lewis and Lydia Ko both started about the same time, and Stacey Lewis, had never won and started using AimPoint and went to number one in the world. Lydia Ko went to number one in the world also, and I think was leading in every putting category. And then if you go more recently on the PGA Tour, Keegan Bradley was a great example where he was historically a very low-ranked putter, and he started AimPoint, and I think went to top 20. Victor Hovland did the same thing. There's loads of guys. Victor Hovland won the FedEx Cup the first year he started using AimPoint, and he was always a great ball striker and a very below-average putter, and I think he went to top 20 in putting also. So, there's probably 15 to 20 examples I can give you on tour where guys went from ranked below 100 in putting to top 20. And so it's just, I think people pay close attention to that, and there's a whole lot of guys who are getting a name point and playing better and more all the time.
yeah. It seems to be working. Like you said, a competitive disadvantage. Why wouldn't you be looking into it? It would be silly not to. I'm curious with you see
Yeah.
on TV when you guys are doing it with the fingers, but then you've also got they're bending. I don't know if you can see this on camera for those that are watching this, but you're bending your arm as well. What is that about? What is that? Is that showing a certain different speed in the greens? Is that showing distance?
Yeah. No, that's primarily green speed. So it's anything speed related. So it's primarily the green speed. You'll calibrate your arm bend or adjust your arm bend based on faster or slower putts. So that might be green speed. It might be uphill, downhill. It could also be how hard the player wants to hit it. So if somebody wants to hit it really soft and be very, very conservative, they bend their arm a little bit more. They get a little more break, and then they can kind of drip it in the high side. If somebody wants to jam it, and hit it a little bit on the firmer side, they can push it forward a little bit. So it's really anything that's speed related you manage with your arm bend. So the number is always a number. A two is always a two. Is it a fast two or a slow two? That will determine some change in arm bend potentially.
The number being always the number referring to the slope that you feel in your feet, a 2-degree slope or 1 degree. Is that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
What about
The slope amount, the slope percentage is a fixed number.
okay. What about a double breaker? We talked about that the straight putts after 7 feet. They're rare, but there would be some sort of double breaker. How do you take that into account? If I'm walking out to the
There's a couple ways to do double breakers. I mean, the easiest way is you just kind of take a weighted average. And I know weighted average sounds mathematical, but there's a spot close to the middle where you can get a very, very good weighted average of the two slopes, and actually works spectacularly well. It works better than you think it would work for double breaks. Um, they tend to be small numbers. They tend to be zeros and ones and 1.5s because double breaks tend to cancel each other, but they don't have to be. I mean, I've had double breaks that played like a 4, that broke just tremendous amounts. But it's the same thing. It's really all about kind of where you're getting your number. And there's a couple different ways. Some are easier, some are more complicated for double breaks, but they tend to be smallish numbers. It's really more about getting the direction and roughly the amount. Um, but there's no, and I mean there's no type of putt that we can't handle. We can handle grain, we can handle wind, we can do double breaks, triple breaks. It doesn't really matter. There's really no gap in. There's really no putt out there at all that I would look at and say, "Ooh, that's a tough one." Like nothing, zero. Doesn't matter how
That's
long it is.
crazy.
Doesn't matter how up or downhill. There's no putt that will stump me. Now, it wasn't like that 10 years ago, but we've kind of figured out all the different scenarios, and part of learning AimPoint is learning all those different corner cases and how do you handle all these bizarre situations. But AimPoint does handle all that. If you do the process correctly, it gives you the right number.
The fact
Number one is the end of the putt really is irrelevant. We've heard our whole life focus on the end. We talked about that, but it's, if you look at the data and you actually go test it, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. In most situations, I could care less what's going on at the end of the putt. Everything's determined prior to that, and a lot of that, like I said, there's an optical illusion when a ball, let's say you play 2 feet of break and the ball comes in, and the last 3 feet it looks like it's kind of snapping and kind of going across your field of vision, looks like it's breaking a lot. It's actually not breaking a lot. It's breaking more the last 3 feet than the first 3 feet for sure, but it's coming in a different angle. Visually, it's going across your field of vision, which looks like break. It's not actual break. Break is how much the ball veers off its line at any point. So if the ball is coming in pointed at the right edge and then breaks 2 inches, now it's at the center of the hole, right? But you might have started that ball 6 feet out somewhere and play a massive amount of break, but the end of it's not actually breaking any more than a normal 3-footer would break. So if I said, what's the most amount of putt break you've ever played on a 3-foot putt, you'd say, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches, maybe a really snappy one, 4 inches. Well, then, the last 3 feet on any other putt is really not breaking any more than that either. If that makes sense.
Is
right? I mean,
the
a 3-foot
distance
putt,
that
how much can a 3-foot putt break? It's not going to break
Yeah.
2 feet.
Where's the sweet spot
Yeah.
where starting
Yeah.
to do the process?
No, I'd say 4 feet for sure 4 feet. For sure 4 feet. Because what most people don't understand is by 4 feet, a lot of putts are outside the hole already. A lot of putts. 1%ers are not quite outside the hole yet. By 5 feet, they start getting outside the hole. By 4 feet, without a good read, you're missing a lot. And even if you look at PGA Tour, they make 99% from 3 feet and 90% from 4 feet. So they go from missing 1 out of 100 to 1 out of 10 in that 3-foot to 4-foot distance. And then they drop to 1 out of 5 from 5 feet. So from 3 to 5 feet, there's a massive drop off in performance, even with the best in the world. 3 feet, I'm not too bothered by it. I want to know if it's breaking or not. So you can't just play them straight. But by 4 and 5 feet, you really need to start getting a more precise aim if you really want to maximize your make percentage there, which you do, because guess where most of your par saves are? They're more likely 4 to 6 feet, not 2 to 3 feet. Right? And if you're a good short game player, if you're a really good short game player, half your par saves are going to be 4 to 6 feet. I mean, usually the way golf develops is you have to develop your long game first, right? You've got to get your penalties and your doubles and triples out of the system, and then you get down, you're shooting kind of high 70s, and then you've got to start removing bogeys from the system, which is more greens, better short game, fewer 3 putts. But the big difference between college golf and tour golf is short game and putting. It's not ball striking. So you can be the number 1 college player in the country and go out on tour, men or women, go on tour, and you will be below average for a tour player. The day you show up, you're going to be below average unless you're just a spectacular putter. And I've seen this many, many times with both men and women. And then it's almost too late, right? So they're a great college player. They're winning loads of tournaments. They're shooting low scores. And then you get on tour, and what happens on tour is they take away greens and fairways. You're going to hit fewer greens, fewer fairways, and you have to shoot, and you have to score better. So where does that come from? Better short game, proximity, better putting. And if you wait until you're 22 years old to work on your short game and putting, you're going to be way behind the ball. I mean, how often have we seen the number 1 player in the country barely be able to keep their card or not be able to keep their card, and maybe takes them years and years before they really hit their stride on tour? It happens all the time. It happens very regularly. So if you're a junior golfer, spend a lot of time on your wedges, spend a lot of time on your putting and understanding putting and speed control. College coaches will love that. In college, you're used to watching people 3-putt from 15 feet a lot. Right? They're great ball strikers hitting 16 greens and shooting 75. 16 greens, you should be shooting 65 theoretically. So really don't neglect your short game and putting as you're a junior, especially moving up through your high school years. And if you want to play pro, which a lot of young players do, you would better have a very good short game and very good putting by the time you graduate. Yeah. I mean, imagine you were allowed to use a laser. And let's say you're a junior golfer, you're allowed to use a laser, but for some reason you say, no, I'm just going to eyeball it. The whole field is using a laser, but you just want to eyeball it. It makes no sense at all. But that's kind of still where putting is. Yes, you have the ability to know a very precise read on every putt, but no, I'd rather just look at it and use my feel. Okay, good luck. That's an option, but good luck, because the people who are not doing that are going to have a big advantage on you. Yeah, a couple things. Number one, they're very dedicated to the golf. They love golf. The majority of really great players I've worked with love the game of golf. They love understanding golf. They love getting better at golf, and they're open-minded about continuously learning and getting better. I've worked with some very good players who are just locked in their habits, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And without fail, over time, they kind of get flushed out of the system because they're not willing to change something that they've done their whole life but isn't necessarily working. So the hard part about being on tour is you're on tour, you've done things a certain way to get there, and so you get very risk averse. But what you have done to get there might not keep you there, right? Or it might, or yeah, it might not keep you there. It might not, might not get you there at all. And having the mindset that, okay, I've been a great golfer my whole life, but I need to be better. I was in college, I was a top 10 college player, but I'm getting killed out here on tour. Well, what needs to change? You need to putt a lot better. You need to hit your wedges a lot closer. They tend to be more open to that and more um, receptive to learning new things and trying new things. The vast majority also, we keep things very simple. Very, 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 very simple. Just core fundamental skills only. Get really good at them. They tend not to think about their stroke. The best putters I've ever worked with, they're just maybe tweak their stroke a little bit, but they're not overly concerned with their putting stroke. It's much more about speed control, and they've got great focus. They're very focused, and they don't get emotional about their shots either. That's the other thing. I've noticed some of the really, really good ones. They can make 30 putts in a row and not even realize they've made 30 putts in a row. They don't get upset by missing a putt. They just hit it and move on, hit the next one. I've seen that quite a bit with some of the really good ones. I think you can learn it, and the focus is interesting because they're very, very focused, but it's kind of a calm focus. They're so focused to the point where if I try to interrupt them, they don't even hear me. Even just practicing, they'd be putting, and I can even try to talk or interrupt them, and it's like I'm not even there, and they don't even realize it. But they tend to be very calm, very focused on what they're doing, and very little, if any, emotional reaction to missing a putt or to hitting a bad shot. Whereas you see a lot of juniors and amateurs, they hit a bad shot and what do? They blame themselves a lot of times first. Oh, I'm terrible, blah, 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 and they beat themselves up. I don't see the good players doing that at all. Yeah, we have AimPoint for a short game for chipping also. It's similar, but there's definitely adjustments you have to make when you're hitting wedges, and we've been teaching it for the last year or two, and it works spectacular.
Nice.
It's not difficult at all, but it's surprising how few people are still using it. Tommy Fleetwood uses it. I've taught a number of guys on tour, but it still hasn't really taken off yet, which I'm not sure why. I think every time I introduce something new, it takes like 5 years for people to really jump on it. I'm too early with with all the new stuff I come out with. But the other thing is just understanding scoring in general. I mean, you can look at junior to college to pro golf, and the stats are very, very clear. What do you have to do to win or excel at those levels? What do you have to shoot? How many greens? How many fairways? What's your scrambling? How much do you have to putt? How many birdies do you have to make? They're very, very, very clear, and I have rarely ever met a player in my life who could spit out those numbers. I could very rarely, even at the tour level, I say, okay, if you want to win, what do you have to do? What do your numbers have to be? How many birdies? How many bogeys? How many greens? What's your par 5 scoring have to be? And the vast majority are like, I don't know. For example, I usually start with PGA Tour. What does it take? What do you have to shoot relative to the cut line in order to win on PGA Tour? The minimum you have to shoot. So if the cut is, let's say, -4, what do you think the minimum score you have to shoot is to win? It's a very, very consistent number, believe it or not, week in and week out practically.
I
What would your
would
guess
say
be? The minimum is 16 below the cut. Cut line -16 is your minimum. And the LPGA, it's 18 below the cut. And if you look week in and week out, that's about the number. The majors are a little less. The majors are like 12 to 14 below the cut. But if you look at pretty much any golf tournament, the winners on average are 16 below the cut. So now you have to build a game around, how do I get to 16 better than the cut line, right? And back to how many greens do I have to hit? How many have to be inside 20 feet? How many of those putts do I need to make? It's the math is very, very, very consistent. But again, people are not taught this younger. They're certainly not taught at the junior and college level. And if you understood that, you'd be much better at saying, okay, I need to design my game around making 24 birdies in 4 days. That's what PGA Tour is. You need to make 24 birdies in 4 days and only 4 bogeys, maybe 5. And that's what's going to take you to win. So how do you build that?
How do you map that
out? well, you map it out and say, okay, if I need, you map it out by it's really greens inside 20 feet. How many can you make? PGA Tour averages 6.5. So all they're doing is 6.5 greens inside 20 feet. But the winners are 8 or 9, and they're converting.
So what does that mean? So greens within 20 feet?
Yeah, that's where all your birdies come from. If you want to make birdies, you got to hit a green inside 20 feet. You're not really making birdie outside 20 feet. So we call those in positions. How many in positions do you need? So hitting the green to 30 feet, okay, you hit a green, but you're not making birdie from there, and there's a good chance you're going to 3-putt from there. So hitting the green anywhere helps avoid bogeys, but it doesn't necessarily create birdies. So it's really greens inside 20 feet is your scoring distance. So where do those come from? They come from par 5s and short approaches. So there's times where you have to be aggressive and you have to be inside 20 feet. But even if you're inside 20 feet, you need to make those putts. So now your conversion rates have to go up. If we look at PGA Tour average conversion rate inside 20 feet is about 50%, 50 to 60%, all putts combined inside 20 feet. If you look at junior level, it's a third of that. So you need to make, so we call it offense and defense. Offense, get inside the red zone, get inside 20 feet, and then you have to score from in there. So you can analyze a player and say, how often are you inside 20 feet? We did this with Sam Burns actually a number of years ago, and he only had, I think, 5.5 per round inside 20 feet. Well, it's just not enough. You can't make enough birdies because you'd have to make birdie every time you're inside 20 feet, which nobody does. So he had to get his in positions higher, and he was already a good putter, but he wasn't in position enough. He wasn't inside the 20-yard line enough. And so he and his coach worked on that and figured out a lot of it was just strategy. Then he was like top 5 FedEx Cup, I think, that year or the year after. So you're really breaking down your game statistically of we know what you need to do. Now it's back into it. How do you get there? How many opportunities do you have? How well do you putt when you miss the green? How well do you chip and putt from there? How many penalties you're making? And the math is very, very clear. Well, listen, if you're an amateur golfer, do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Go out there, be as purist as you want. Nobody cares. But if you're playing competitive golf, now if we compare golf against every other major competitive sport in the world, football, basketball, baseball, soccer, cricket, whatever, rugby, the amount of data analysis they do is off the charts compared to golf. Golf is so late to the game on this competitively. Especially if you look at football, baseball. Think about the stats they have and the performance metrics they have for every player going down to high school and lower. And then you look at golf and they're like, oh, I just want to feel it. Brandel the other day said, oh, historically, you just have to be a genius on the greens to be a good putter. It's like, okay, well, historically that might have been true, but that was also true for full swing before they had TrackMan and really good, swing mechanics. And you just got there, and if you were good at full swing, you were good at full swing. Well, congratulations. What about all the rest of us? What about all the rest of us who were not born with that ability to just figure your swing out or to just figure out how much a ball breaks, me being included? I don't accept the fact that I'm just screwed by nature, that I don't have this ability to read greens. That was this built-in chip in my brain that I can see it like some people can, but not many. That's just me not to be a bad golfer. Am I resigned to that? No, heck no. You can actually go out there and figure it out and piece it together. And I think that's one of the beauties of it. Oh yeah. Well, you always have to figure out, you always have to estimate what the slope is. The key with the short game is that you've got to capture the deflection of the ball when it hits the ground. So the ball is landing, deflecting off a slope, and then breaking. And so you've got to basically capture that also, which is no big deal. But if you ignore that, what happens? You miss everything low. You're missing everything 4, 5, 6, 7 feet low, and then you've got these hard par saves. So just like hitting a lag putt, let's get the best read we can and try to control our speed. And that'll dramatically improve the accuracy of your short game, which dramatically reduces bogeys, which are The high level of golf, we're looking at 1 bogey a round is really 2 bogeys a round average, but 1 bogey a round to win. That's hitting 13 greens, let's say. So you got to get up and down, 4 out of 5 times from anywhere. The better your read is, the more likely you are to get up and down. Sure. Yeah, we're always doing that because that's always the conversion tool. The fingers are always the conversion tool that says, now that I have my slope number, where does that mean I have to aim? And so the fingers will show you where to aim your chip shot. Yeah, I mean, most people just do that dynamically. They just know what eye to close. It really shouldn't matter a whole lot, honestly. I don't know too many people do it with both eyes open. Occasionally when somebody's cross dominant, whether let's say they're left-handed but right eye dominant, occasionally they see kind of weird things if they use their right hand in their left eye. So they just switch what hand they use. I think, the most foolproof way to do it is hand behind your dominant eye, but it shouldn't really matter, honestly. Although every blue moon, people say I can't figure out what they're seeing, and we switch what hand they use, and that's fine. I always use the same hand, same eye. I'm a fan of always using the same hand, just so it's consistent.
But this was
yeah. If you go to aimpointgolf.com, I do teach private lessons and group lessons, but I only teach 1 or 2 days a week because I travel a lot. Around the world, there's about 350 certified AimPoint instructors, kind of spread all over the place. And you can also go and on aimpointgolf.com, you can also get a link to online instructional videos. So we do have a very complete video set out there that goes through everything basics, advanced, super advanced. And then we also have a monthly subscriptions called AimPoint Plus, where every week we put a new video on that just allows you to just keep chipping away at your knowledge. There's lessons and different ideas and statistics and mental game and all kinds of cool stuff on that. So you can get to all of that through aimpointgolf.com. I would say a couple things. First of all, let your kid enjoy golf. You definitely want to develop their full swing, but don't neglect short game and putting. And honestly, I get asked all the time who are good short game coaches, and honestly, there's not a whole lot of people who really specialize in short game. But if you can find somebody who's a good wedge coach, do it early. Do it as early as you can. Learn AimPoint early, and then let your kids develop speed control after that. But also, depending on their age, you got to make sure they're enjoying golf. I've had a lot of kids who came to me as spectacular golfers who hated the game. They had too much pressure. They didn't like the environment they were in, and they all quit when they were 18 years old, or when they graduated college, they quit and never looked back. So be careful not to stress them out too much. Let them play for the love of the game and develop their skills without pushing too hard. Yeah, thanks a lot. It's great to be on.
Thank you so much for listening to the Golf Parent Podcast. The best way to support what we're doing here is to check out any of our amazing sponsors. Grab a copy of The Adventures of Chase and Bella for the kids in your life. It's $18.99 on Amazon, and honestly, it teaches them more about focus and intention than most parenting books teach adults. And if you haven't grabbed the 99 Mistakes Guide yet, what are you waiting for? It's free, it's at thegolfparent.com, and it could genuinely change how you approach your kid's journey. You only get one chance at this, golf parents, so let's get it right. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.